Well, I'm very happy to see you all this evening. Is there any special topic that you would like me to talk about? We have no idea. Yeah?
That is the one with what it said in the letter that you were talking about. Buddhism is not atheism.
Buddhism?
It's not an atheism.
Atheism?
Yeah.
Well, very often people say that Buddhism is an atheistic philosophy. But the reason for this is the definition of religion according to the Oxford Dictionary and other dictionaries, even Webster's or any English dictionary, defines religion as a belief in and worship of supernatural beings called gods, and so for anything to be a religion, you have to believe in those things. Now in Buddhism, it's not that we don't think of a kind of being called God, or we use the word Deva. So we are not really atheistic in that way. And a proper definition of the teachings of the Buddha would be a humanistic religion. It's not theistic nor atheistic. It is humanistic. That is the better translation. And we have to understand the meaning of religion. Religion is defined in the West as belief in gods. Many gods or one God, monotheistic or polytheistic, but the Buddhist way of thinking is different. Religion, to understand this, the first thing that we have to understand is that there are no different religions in the world. First thing to understand. There are different cultures. That means you know that all animals they don't live alone. They are mainly living in groups. So in the same way, human beings also live in groups. The reason is partly to be living among others, there is a certain amount of security. Because life itself is insecure. That's the first thing to understand. That is the problem of life. From the time we are born, we are in the process of dying. The baby, the first thing that when the baby is born, what does the baby do? First thing is to cry. Why? When the baby comes out of the mother's womb, the baby is uncomfortable. Another problem is that the baby was not breathing while inside the mother's womb. The first thing that the baby has to do is to start breathing. And the other thing is, no one touched the baby, but now people are touching the baby. And the baby has to open the eyes and light comes into the eye. That is also uncomfortable. All kinds of smells come into the mind and the nose. That is also uncomfortable. So many discomforts the moment you are born. And if you don't have the milk or the food, that baby is going to die. If no one looked after the baby, that baby is going to die. So the moment that child is born, is faced with the insecurity of life. And out of the influence of the various animals, the human infant is the weakest. Now other animals after a day or two may be walking about, or the fish may be swimming, but the human baby, infant, has to be looked after by the parents or any elders, and the baby can move about only after a few years. That is the insecurity of life. And this makes the baby feel helpless and weak and insecure. When there is any problem, the baby will cry, and then the parents or whoever is looking after will come and help. So as the baby begins to grow, the baby always depends on the older people. So the only security is older people, as the child grows, the child begins to think, oh, when I become an adult, I'll be secure. But when this child becomes an adult, this adult human being begins to realize that the parents are as helpless as himself or herself. And as an adult, when the adult is in trouble, what does the adult do? Where is the help coming from? The only thing is to think of the parents, but now the parents are also helpless. And so, what can be done? Every culture, every group of people like that, they have a solution. And what is that solution? That is what is called religion. And this solution is, oh, there is a God, a supernatural being who is controlling the world. We can pray to this God and then get help. That is the meaning of religion. Religion is what brings the feeling of security. And that feeling of security is based on a God that no one has seen. So they simply keep the belief going because that brings the feeling of security. So you don't have to see the God. They can see only statues or pictures, and that is all that we see. So that is the meaning of religion. Religion is finding a feeling of security. And at the same time, there is another problem. That human beings tend to be carried away by emotions. When we become angry, we begin to fight and quarrel. When we become sexually excited, we tend to be carried away by that, and maybe we are behaving in the wrong way. Because of these emotions, people begin to do things that are harmful to oneself as well as others. And therefore, there must be a solution to that. Now that solution is also provided by religion. Religion has certain laws of behavior, like the 10 Commandments or something like that. So religion provides two things: the feeling of security and gives a set of rules to be obeyed. And if you don't obey the rules, you are told that you will be punished by God and you will be sent to hell. Or if you live a good life, you will be rewarded by being sent to heaven. You see, this is what religion is doing. But all that is based on the belief in these supernatural beings who are governing the world. That is what religion is doing. All religions are doing the same thing. That means different cultures have only different names for these gods. And not only different names, even the picture that is drawn is similar to the picture of the people in that particular country or particular culture. So the names and the shape of the images will be according to that particular culture. But every culture is saying the same thing. You see, there is a slight difference in the teachings of the Buddha, different from all cultures. What is that difference? How this same problem was seen by Prince Siddhartha. You are, I think, familiar with the life of the Buddha. That Prince Siddhartha was having all the luxuries available at that time. Although there was no radio, no television, no air conditioning, all these modern facilities were not available, but still his father was rich enough to build two buildings which were really 7-story buildings. So he was rich enough to do that. And each building was built to suit the particular state of the environment, like winter time, one building, and the hot season, another building, rainy season, another building. So like that, he had all the facilities. And also, although there was no TV or radios, there were dancers coming and dancing for the prince, and various other ways of singing and dancing and all kinds of things where they were entertained. But after some time, he began to see or become aware of the realities of life. What is the reality of life? That every person who is born begins to grow old. No one likes to grow old. Everyone begins to fall sick. No one likes to fall sick. And ultimately everyone has to die. This is the insecurity of life. And when he saw this, did he run after gods to solve this? There were people who were running to gods, but he didn't go after gods. He began to think for himself. He used his own intelligence. This is why it was humanistic. It is the human intelligence that he used. You see, in the West, there was a time in the Western civilization which is called the Age of Enlightenment. The 18th century, that was the time when science began. And when science began, they began to realize a very important law. That law is called determinism. And determinism means that everything that happened in the world, every natural occurrence is determined by the presence of the necessary conditions. When certain conditions are present, it happens. When the conditions are absent, it doesn't happen. When people began to realize this, that is how science began. All the modern scientific technology is based on this principle. And when that happened, people lost faith in the religious dogmas that believed in supernatural beings who control the world. When they began to realize this, they began what are called revolutions. Because the kings wanted to defend religion. Because people were told that the kings got the power from God. But people didn't believe that. Now the educated people lost faith in that. They didn't think that the kings got the power from God. So they started revolutions against the kings. So started the French Revolution, the English Revolution, and so this went into politics and various things, Marxist revolution. All these revolutions came up with this age of enlightenment, when people lost faith in the religious dogmas. So today, when people have problems, they were thinking in terms of how did certain things happen? What are the conditions necessary? You know, in ancient times, when people wanted fire, what did they do? They had to rub two sticks together, keep on rubbing till it catches fire. But today, when you want to light a cigarette, what do? Strike a match. How did the match come about? They began to think, what are the conditions necessary for a flame to arise? And they provided the conditions. You know how Henry Ford created this motor vehicle? He was looking for the conditions necessary for a vehicle to go. In ancient times, they had to use horses and other animals to pull the vehicle. But Henry Ford discovered the method of making a motor vehicle. And then people also, when they saw birds flying, they also liked to fly. But they didn't have the wings like the birds. But then they again used the human intelligence. So this is why these people who are called the Wright brothers, they thought, what are the conditions necessary for flight to take place? And somehow they created the airplane. So in this way, so many other things were done. Now we have electric lights, electric fans, air conditioning. How did these things come? And this wonderful thing called computer. Now people are even able to go to the moon and even other planets. All these wonderful things are done because they understood what are the conditions necessary for something to happen. And the most wonderful thing that happened during the time of the Buddha was that he, more than 2,500 years before, the scientist came to know about this. He came to know about this same law, but he didn't call it the law of determinism. He called it paticca samuppada. Hetum paticca sambhutam hetu bhanga nirujjati. Those are the Pali words. What does it mean? When the conditions are present, it comes into being. When the conditions are absent, it ceases to be. That everything that happens in the world happens due to the presence of the necessary conditions. Now, if we discovered this law of determinism at that time, you might ask, why didn't he create the electric lamp? Why didn't he create the airplane? Why didn't he create the motor vehicle and all these machines? That's a good question. You see, during the time of the Buddha, there was a man who came to the Buddha and asked, I have understood that you have become a Buddha means you have certain psychic powers. You have a power where if you make a wish, may this great mountain, the Mount Everest, if you simply make the wish, may this mountain become a mountain of gold, it will become a mountain of gold. You have that power. Please, out of compassion for the world, for these suffering beings, please make that wish. So the Buddha said, well, you have understood me. It is true that I have a power like that. But do you know that if I make that wish and this mountain becomes a mountain of gold, do you know how many people will be killed as a result? Today we know that there was a thing that happened in North America in history called the Gold Rush, and how many people were killed by going after gold. So that was proved. And so, you see, the Buddha, having known this law of determinism, he didn't use that law to conquer nature. He didn't try to change the world. He saw a problem that our desires are coming in conflict with the natural laws. The nature is dependent on conditions. Whatever happens in nature is happening only when the conditions are present, and the conditions are changing all the time. And therefore, nothing can be stable in the world, the instability of things. But our wishes, our desires, our emotions are going against that. And that is why all the suffering, unhappiness in the world. We are not willing to accept the realities of life. That is the cause of all our unhappiness. Therefore, instead of changing the world, the Buddha decided to change the mind. It is by changing our mind that the problem of unhappiness will disappear. And so, he taught people how to change the mind. The important thing to understand that when we talk about the mind, there are no two things called body and mind. That's the first thing to understand. We only have a body. We don't have a separate thing called mind. What we call the mind is simply an activity of the body. Now, modern scientists have been trying to discover this thing called mind. This subject called psychology began as a study of the mind. But very soon they discovered that there is no mind to study. So they changed the meaning of psychology as the study of human behavior. Because there was no mind to study. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that there is no such thing as a mind here. We have only the body. And there are three activities of the body that we refer to as mind. The Buddha used three words for this. Chitta, Mano, and Vijnana. He pointed out that the human body, there are 5 senses: the eyes, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the whole body becomes a sense organ. And these senses are stimulated by the environment. The whole body is an organism in an environment. And changes taking place in the environment stimulate the senses. What we call light is a change going on in the environment. But when light comes onto the eye, we begin to see. Seeing is a reaction of the organism to the stimulation by light. Another kind of movement in the environment is what we call sound. When that environmental movement comes to the ear, we hear a sound. That is again, the ear is reacting to the stimulus. What we call smell is another movement in the environment. And it comes to the nose reacts to that. So we get the smell. What we call taste is another movement in the environment. When it comes to the tongue, we feel the taste. Touch is another movement in the environment. When it comes to the body, we feel the touch. And that reaction is what we call perception. So what the Buddha called vijnana is perception. Today that word vijnana is wrongly translated as consciousness. It is not consciousness, it is perception. There were some people during the time of the Buddha who came to the Buddha and asked the question, we have these 5 senses, and these 5 senses are able to perceive different things. What the eye perceives is light. We see things. What the ear perceives is sound. Sound is very different from what the eye sees. And what the nose perceives is smell. That is also different. What the tongue perceives is taste. That is also different. What the body perceives is touch. That is also different. Where do these things come and meet? That was the question. So the Buddha said, Mano. Mano is the place where these things come and meet. Today, the modern scientists are aware that from every sense organ, there is a nerve going to the brain, optic nerve going to the brain, auditory nerve going from the ear to the brain, olfactory nerve going from the nose to the brain. So in a similar way, all senses, there are nerves like telephone wires going to the brain. All the messages from the senses go to the brain. That is the meeting place. And when it comes to the brain, what does the brain do? The brain begins to think. The thinking is done in the brain. And when the brain thinks, what happens is, You form a concept. What the I does is a percept. But the brain forms a concept which gives meaning to what you saw, or what you heard, or what you smelled, or what you tasted, what you touched. And this meaning, when the meaning is understood, that is something more than perception. It is conception. And today, the modern psychologists call that cognition. That is what is called cognition. So once you have cognized something, given meaning to what you have seen or heard, what happens? An emotional reaction occurs. Either you desire what you saw, or you hated what you saw, or you are frightened from what you saw, or you are worried about what you saw. That is an emotional reaction. That emotional reaction, what is an emotional reaction? The emotional reaction is a disturbance of the whole body. It's not just a thought. The whole body is disturbed. That means a message goes from the brain to a gland, and the gland secretes a hormone into the blood, and the heart begins to pump, and it goes to the whole body. And changes take place in the body. If you become angry, the message goes to a gland called the adrenal gland, and a hormone called adrenaline is secreted into the blood, and that is carried to the whole body. And other things like even sexual disturbance occurs. Sexual glands secretes sexual hormones. So like that, different hormones become activated and different emotional disturbances take place in the body. And today, it was a psychologist and also a professor in Canada who wrote a book called Stress and Stress Management. And there he pointed out that this disturbance is what is creating all the problems. And that can even lead the person ultimately to death itself. So these disturbances is what the Buddha was talking about. And this is what the Buddha was talking about, and he found a way to get these emotions completely eradicated, rooted out. I came to United States long time ago, 1970s. And when I came, I was asked to talk to some Americans. And I told them that the Buddha has brought all lust, hate, and delusion to an end. He has eradicated these things, emotions. They began to laugh. I asked why you were laughing. They said, that is an impossible thing. Because according to Sigmund Freud, these things cannot be eradicated. But long after Freud, it was somewhere in the 1960s, that a group of psychologists who are now called cognitive psychologists, they pointed out that it is possible to bring these emotions to an end. That is, by changing the way you interpret your circumstances, it is possible to stop the emotional excitement. So I pointed out that there is a book called the Dhamma, a book of verses. There the first verse says, Mano Pubbangama Dhamma. There the word mano refers to cognition. There are two words, mano referring to that thinking part and chitta referring to the emotional part. Mano Pubbangama Dhamma means that the thinking part precedes the emotional part. It is the thinking part that starts the emotional excitement. So if you begin to change the way you think, the emotional arousal will stop. And that is the method by which the Buddha was able to eradicate all emotional excitements. So it's very important to understand this, and it is how the Buddha pointed out that it is possible to bring all suffering to an end. All the sufferings are created by these emotional disturbances. And when we can bring these emotional disturbances to an end, all suffering comes to an end. So this is the important thing to understand. So there are 3 steps in this process. which the Buddha called Sila, Samadhi and Panya. Sila means first thing is to learn to gain control over our behavior. Now, like practicing the 5 precepts is learning to gain control over our behavior. That means even if we become emotionally excited, we first learn to gain control over our behavior. And then the next step is to learn to calm the mind. Samadhi is not concentration, samadhi is calming the mind. Tranquility. That is the meaning of samadhi. Today it is translated as concentration. That's the wrong translation. Samadhi is tranquility of mind. And once the mind has become tranquil, we can begin to change our way of thinking. When the mind is not calm, it's difficult to think properly. But when the mind has been brought to a calm state, then we are able to examine the way we think and then correct the thinking. That is what is called vipassana meditation. The real vipassana is learning to change the way we think. And that changing is to understand 3 things: anicca, dukkha and anatta. Anicca is the instability of things. Whatever is dependent on conditions is unstable. And this instability is unpleasant. The instability. And that is how it turns into unhappiness. And once we have understood that things are not happening as we want, we have to understand if it is not happening as we want, it means it is not under our power. If something is not under my power, it cannot be mine. If it is not mine, then it cannot be myself. If it is not myself, then we have to give up what is not myself. We cannot become attached to what is not myself. If this body begins to grow old, fall sick and die, that means this body is not mine because it's not under my power. If it is not under my power, it's not mine. And if it is not mine, we have to let go of it. It is by letting go of everything that we think is mine that comprehending that brings all suffering to an end. So this is why ultimately the solution is letting go, which is relaxation. to let go. But of course, we become so much attached to things of the world that we find it very difficult to let go. So this is why we need a training, and that training is these 3 steps. First, control our behavior, then we learn to calm the mind, and then we begin to think in the right way. That becomes the ultimate goal, which brings all suffering to an end. So I hope you understood all this. At least you thought about it. And if you understand it well enough, you will be free from all unhappiness. So if you have any questions, you can ask now. Yeah?
I wonder if you might talk about what you said about the Vipassana meditation, a little bit of detail around
I have a small problem. I cannot hear properly. So you have to, if you hear what you said.
He said, could you talk a little bit more
Huh?
about, can you talk more about Vipassana?
Oh, the Vipassana. That's what he was asking, huh? Well, this is a big story. So I can only put it in a few words. Vipassana simply means changing the way you think. That is the meaning of Vipassana. But we cannot get into that Vipassana till we go through these 3 steps: Sila, Samadhi and Panya. Sila is to control our behavior. First step is to control the behavior. Then the second step is to calm the mind. And the third step is to change the way we think. So the real meaning of the word Vipassana is changing the way you think. But that is the ultimate end. But first you have to start with the disciplining of behavior. That is the thing to understand. Now there is what is called, normally translated as the Noble Eightfold Path. I translate that. That is also not the exact translation. So I translate it as the supernormal eightfold way. The Arya, the word Arya is translated as noble. That is not correct. The word Arya really means supernormal. Because the normal people are people who are carried away by emotions. So when a person has completely eradicated emotional excitement, that is not a normal condition. It is a supernormal condition. Now today the modern psychotherapy is an effort to change and abnormal condition to a normal condition. That is what modern psychotherapy is trying to do. But what the Buddha tried to do was to change the normal person to a supernormal person. That's the difference. It is also kind of psychotherapy, but the psychotherapy for normal people to transcend the normal weaknesses of the human mind. It is a transcendental meditation. And that is to reach the state of supernormal state. Yeah. So that is the important thing to understand. But don't be discouraged by thinking that, well, I will never enter the supernormal state. Don't think like that. It is the normal people who ultimately reach that state by practicing the right method. You have to go gradually. It's a gradual evolution of the human being. It is a process of evolution. But the normal biological evolution happened unconsciously. But this is a psychological evolution which has to happen consciously. It doesn't happen unconsciously. By becoming conscious of the problem of existence and to transcend that through a conscious practice. So what we call meditation is a conscious process of evolving from the normal to the supernormal state. That's the important thing to understand. Yeah.
If we are only our body, how do we not have power over ourselves?
What's that?
If we are only a body, how do we not have power over ourselves?
Well, it's not the power that is important here. It is the wisdom that is important. So it is the thinking mind that has to grow, and what is needed is the thinking. So it is a gradual evolution of consciousness. It is the gradual evolution of the thinking process. That's the important thing to understand. It's not power that is important here, but the wisdom. So, this is why to take refuge in the Buddha is not to take refuge in the powers of the Buddha, but the wisdom of the Buddha. That's the important thing. Yeah?
I'm confused. I was taught that the power
That's it?
She's confused about something.
about the cause and effect relationship, karma, So what I understand is that how you do, how you act, the fruits of your life, that comes back to you, that there is a cause and effect and karma. But yet, when innocent people are killed, I don't understand this. Where is that karma connection?
She's confused about karma.
Karma.
She said karma, meaning
Huh?
she defines karma as cause and effect.
Well, this is a mistake. That karma is not just cause and effect. That's the wrong translation of karma. Karma simply means the emotion. It is that emotion that is karma. So we have to gradually reduce the emotional excitement. That is the important thing. It is the emotion that is creating all the problems. So that word tanha is wrongly translated as craving. Tanha is not craving. Tanha is emotion. That is the important thing to understand.
Our sutta study class.
Huh?
We have a sutta study class, so we've been translating tanha as craving.
Yeah. Those are mistakes made by the early translators. It was mainly Christ Davies who translated these things. And all the others who were also helping him to translate were I.B. Horner, F.L. Woodward, and people like that. But they were going on the same choice of words to translate. But I have been going through those words and I found that it doesn't convey the meaning properly. Tanha really is the emotion.
So part of Peggy's question, part of what she said was that she doesn't understand why terrible things happen to innocent people. And how does karma play into that?
Well, the thing happening to people is karma comes in two ways. You see, karma of the present and karma of the past. In the past life, whatever emotions you are living with will determine the situation you are born into. And so it's not only the present emotion that is involved here, but even the past is involved in this situation. And that is how these things can happen to people. So we don't have to worry about those things. The important thing is to look after the present. There are certain things that happen due to the past emotional condition. But even if you are now, say, for example, there was that man who had no legs, no arms. What is the main name of that person? Who gives talks and points out how he managed to conquer his difficulties. Never heard of that person?
Yes, I think he's Australian.
Huh?
Who? Yeah, I don't know his name, but I think he's an Australian.
Is he from Australia? Someone from Australia?
I can't remember whether he's from Australia or not.
Yeah, he's a motivational speaker.
But he speaks?
Huh?
He speaks to groups now?
Yeah,
Okay, they've seen him, but they don't know what his name is.
yeah. The important thing is that he points out that he was born in that way because of bad karma in the past. But still, by doing good karma here now, he has been able to somehow manage, and he's earning a lot of money, and he has a nice girlfriend, and maybe
As a child.
having children also now.
As a child.
Huh?
She said he has a child. He doesn't.
Yeah. So we don't have to worry about the past karma. The important thing is to look after the present. The important thing is to look after the present, and if you act in the right way, not to be worried about your circumstances, but how you respond to situations instead of emotionally reacting to situations. Instead of emotional reaction, we must cultivate a rational response. That's the important thing.
Could you talk about concentration meditation?
Can you talk about concentration meditation?
Well, there is no real thing called concentration meditation. It's only calming, relaxing the body and calming the mind. That is the meaning of samatha meditation. It's not concentration. That's another mistake that people are making. Because if you begin to concentrate, the real result of concentration is entering the hypnotic state. Hypnosis comes from concentration. But many people practice concentration, they get hypnotized and they imagine they have attained samadhi.
Do they hypnotize themselves?
Yeah. So that is not real samadhi. Real samadhi is a completely different thing, not a hypnotic state. It's a purification of the mind, relaxing the body and calming the mind. Yeah?
I'd like to follow up on Eric's question. So is samadhi then an act of letting go versus concentration is an effort? Is that fundamental difference?
Is samadhi letting go and concentration is effort?
Concentration is an effort, yeah. This is the opposite of effort, relaxing, yeah.
And letting go.
Letting go, yeah. That's right.
Even in the jhana states?
Yeah. Jhana is letting go.
It's more
Yeah.
relaxing.
Yeah.
There's a question.
So the term concentration came up because people confuse that because there's an object of attention,
Yeah.
singular,
Yeah.
that they confuse it with the volitional act of concentrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the connection between samadhi and improving one's thinking? I mean, there may be clearly obvious, but I'm just curious if there's a direct connection. Is it a natural progression of improvement of thinking? Or is it an effort?
What's the difference between samadhi and improving?
What's the connection?
What's the connection between samadhi and improving one's thinking?
Well, when the mind is calm, you can think more clearly. That's the difference.
That's the connection.
Yeah,
The difference and the connection.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Why do anything other than meditate?
Why do anything other than meditate?
Well, that is, you have to ask yourself why you are doing all kinds of things. But the important thing, meditation is not doing, it is to stop doing. Meditation is not a doing, it is to stop doing, which is to relax the body and calm the mind. Yeah.
So in a relaxed state, with a calm mind, what prevents you from going to sleep?
What is it?
If you have a relaxed mind and calm, what prevents you from falling asleep?
Oh, falling asleep is an unconscious process. When you fall asleep means you don't know what is happening to you. That's an unconscious process. But here, relaxation is done consciously. It's a conscious process. Yeah.
Okay, it's a conscious process to stay awake and the kind to relax, but it's unconscious if we fall asleep.
That is because you try to, when you begin to concentrate, you are forcing your mind to concentrate. And then you get tired and you go unconscious. That's how it happens.
Too much effort, right?
Yeah, too much effort.
I like this because better.
Yeah.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, my understanding right now about meditation, when you calm the mind, then it's purifying the mind at some subtle level and clearing out
Yeah.
mystical things you've accumulated, like bad karma and emotions, are clearing when you're in that blissful, state. Is that truth to that?
That's what it is, yeah.
Yes.
To tie back to Eric's question, to Dave's question, to Chris's comment, to Llue, you asked about the relaxation. So I have a lot of confusion about proper concentration, and I don't know if it relates more to what Chris is commenting about with attention versus object, which is the relaxation over too much concentration and sleep. Is that the big? Am I explaining that right? I know, I'm trying to understand proper concentration versus what Chris talked about, concentration between attention. Is that? Yeah, I guess talk a little more about the misinterpretation of the word.
What's the question?
What's proper concentration?
Proper concentration. What's proper attention versus concentration?
Oh, what's the difference between proper attention and concentration?
With concentration, you can you can hold attention, concentration, and it can become the same thing. But instead of talking about attention, you can speak of awareness. When you relax, you are aware of certain things, but you don't have to pay attention. Attention can come in the form of concentration.
So it's more, you want awareness instead of
Attention.
attention.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's now 8:30.
Thank you.
So, we can take only one question. Do you have any one question? Last question?
I have one, but I've already gone to somebody else.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question?
Okay,
Did you lose it?
my question is relates to behavior and discipline. And is discipline, what are the roles of will and insight regarding discipline?
What are the roles of will and insight regarding discipline?
Well, the important thing is to understand that when we talk about the mind, there are two parts. One is the thinking part and the other is the emotional part. Emotional part is not able to think. It simply gets excited, and the excitement comes with tension, and then the tension is released in action. That's how it happens. But what we call will is simply the thinking part comes and stops the emotional release of tension. So when the thinking part comes and finds that the emotion is aroused, the thinking part can say no, don't release the tension in action, and you can stop. It is the thinking part that stops that. And that is what we normally call will or willpower or whatever you call it.
And then that versus insight. And I guess my question is about what creates real change in behavior. Is it willpower or is it insight or are they both?
No, there is no power involved in this. It is the thinking part that stops the activity of the emotional part. Finds out what are the consequences of that reaction, or the release of tension will have bad consequences, and therefore this is something that is very important to understand, because the other animals are not able to do this. It is only the human being who can stop that action. The thinking part can come and stop the action. So what is called willpower is that, and that willpower is possible only to the human being. But every human being is not using that. And that is why there is so much crime and wars and all these things in the world. Because they are not using that willpower, which is the thinking part is not interfering with the activities of this is, our mind begins to pull in two different directions. The emotions pulling in one direction, the thinking part pulling in the opposite direction. And that is what is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is that. So what we need is cognitive consonance. which means the thinking and the emotion must go in the one direction. Unification of the mind. That is what is called Chitta Ekagrata. Chitta Ekagrata means that. Eka Agga means one end. Eka means one, Agga means end. Huh? Ekagrata, yeah.
Tomorrow morning, one is available 9 to 10. So before meditation, I think this take more than 1 hour.
What?
Tomorrow morning we'll be here.
Tomorrow?
Morning.
In the morning. from
Yeah,
9 to
yeah,
10.
yeah.
So people can ask more questions.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Only one question I have.
One more question.
One more question.
Do we ever actively analyze things in meditation?
What's that?
Do we ever actively analyze things in meditation?
No. It's not a matter of analyzing. It's a matter of calming the mind.
Just calming the mind?
Yeah.
I'm glad you answered it that way.
Yeah.
I tried to say the wrong thing to other people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and also they have done that. Please donate as much as you can for monthly travel expenses. Okay, thank you so much. Have a good night, and also one more thing. Tomorrow morning, 9 to 10. Bus is available. If you have any questions, you can arrange the table with that code, social code. Or you can come and go to live. Okay, thank you so much. And also, 10 o'clock, regular meditation, and also another big pudding. His name is Llue. She's going to give it a Dhamma.
Thank you.